Hey guys, it's Andrew, your friendly neighborhood realtor, and what I want to focus on today's video is what impact noise pollution has on a property and on your health actually. And what's interesting is I've been doing a lot of research about this, and it's fascinating and it's kind of amazing how much of a difference a noisy environment versus a non-noisy environment has on you and on your health. So what we're going to do today is we're going to explore this a little bit and look at some of the implications of noise pollution when it comes to buying a property. So let's get started. So we've pretty much all been in a situation where we're trying to maybe sit down, have a quiet lunch, and we hear somebody banging with a hammer on the house next to you, or you're trying to wake up in the morning and you hear that loud person revving their motorcycle. Any of you people that grew up in the 90s, dial-up sound? That's definitely something that would be an annoying, unwanted sound. And that's essentially the definition of noise. It's just sound that you don't want. And so what's interesting too is I was kind of looking at this was, so the way that I'm talking to you right now is about 60 decibels, which is a tenth of a decibel. And the bull is actually, I've just been researching so much and I actually really enjoyed learning about this, but the bell part of decibel, that's Alexander Graham Bell. And so at 0, that's pretty much, we can't hear anything as humans. So 0 decibels, can't hear anything. 60 is basically what I'm talking to you in. And where you start to have like noise, like causing hearing loss, that would be about 140. And just for some perspective, because we're going to talk a little bit about airplanes as we go through this video, but for some perspective, an airplane taking off, that one's about 100,000 times louder than I am talking to you right now. So going back to a little bit about the difference between noise and sound, like I said before, noise is sound that you don't want, that's unwanted. And so that's where it starts to become not just so much a nuisance, but something that affects you physically. Now, there's a lot of loud things in our lives that aren't noise. So like, for example, a lot of people sleep with like a white noise machine. What is the difference between that person hammering next door and that person using the white noise machine, and one being something really jarring and something that's kind of soothing for a lot of people? A lot of people can't even sleep without a white noise machine. Is that there is a lot of times with that noise, there's no pattern. And one thing that I was learning about was that our brains are so dependent on patterns. And that's kind of what our ears are always listening for, and our brains are always looking for a pattern in the environment around us. And so white noise, or even like a waterfall, which can be really loud, but those wouldn't be typically considered noise pollution because our brains are able to recognize the pattern associated with that and push that to the side and not let that sort of affect us. Whereas somebody who's banging with a hammer next door on the roof, or that person that's, you know, starting their motorcycle early in the morning, that would be associated as noise because there's not a pattern there and it's jarring. So now let's talk a little bit about some of the impact that sound and noise pollution have on you personally. So it's pretty obvious, hearing loss is a big one. But it goes beyond that too, because there is a response in our bodies when we hear what would be considered a noise. And it's kind of that fight or flight response actually. So if you remember that, I think now it's actually fight, flight, or freeze. I think there's 3 now, but for simplicity, we'll just say fight or flight. But basically it's causing a stress to your system when you hear that noise. And it actually, a lot of times, it might be sort of a subconscious stress, like you're not actively thinking about it. So, you know, when your phone rings or when you hear that ambulance drive by, you might not be thinking, oh my gosh, there's noise, and it might not really impact you, but it does hit your stress response, whether you can help it or not. So the difference between an ambulance driving by and a bear, you know, roaring at you, or a dog barking at you when you're going down the street, and, you know, you get afraid by those last 2 things, the ambulance actually has the same effect on our bodies. So in our veins, we have endothelium, which is like it's the lining around the blood vessels. And when it is exposed to those stressful noises, again, subconsciously stressful, maybe not actively stressful, but if you're living next to that busy highway, that noise and those trucks going by and, you know, that hot rod that goes by, it's going to affect that, that lining on your blood vessels, and it causes a contraction. And that's not good. What we're actually seeing, and when I say we, I mean what I've been seeing online talking about this, is that there's a huge response in your body, like higher blood pressure for one, which can lead to strokes and heart attacks and learning difficulties, and quite a lot of issues that come from this stress response to noise pollution. One actually study that came out was during the 70s, there was a school in Manhattan. On one side of the school, there was the subway, and then on the other side, there wasn't. And the students that lived on the side of the school where the subway was going by quickly and loudly, they were actually about 11 months behind their counterparts in the same grade, in the same age bracket as on the other side. So 11 months behind because of this noise pollution. And the way that they were able to kind of determine that was they did a whole bunch of soundproofing on one side of the school, and those students ended up, the gap shrank in between those students subject to the side of the school that had the noise pollution versus the ones that didn't. But that goes to show that there is a really big impact to the environment that we live in. And if we spend so much of our times at home, we need to keep that in mind as we're thinking of buying a home, whether or not this is too noisy or what kind of an impact is this going to have on my health. It's even gotten to the point so far where they've actually determined that noise pollution doesn't necessarily just give you these conditions like, you know, high blood pressure and hearing loss, but it can actually kill you. So what they did was they took a sample of people that died in their sleep, and I don't know how they did this exactly, but essentially they took all the variables out, and one thing that connected these people that were that had passed away in their sleep, and usually it was like a heart attack or something like that, but the one thing that connected them all was they were over a flight path and during the night. And so I guess at some point during the night, that plane flew over their house, and that stress response, that fight or flight, that constriction of those vessels was enough to sort of send them over the edge. You know, that was the last little bit of stress that they needed to trigger that heart attack or to cause, you know, whatever it is that killed them. So that's kind of intense, but really it's very important for us to think about noise pollution, maybe more than we usually do, because clearly it has a bigger impact. And so what I do with my clients is I end up taking them always usually to the front or backyard or wherever we are in the house, and I just say, everybody be quiet and let's take a listen and let's think about how loud it is right now and if that's something that you're comfortable living with. And there's been a few times where we've been at a really nice house, but the location, as far as proximity to like the highway, I live here in Edmonton, so we have a highway that goes around our city called the Anthony Henday. It's a ring around the whole city, and actually it can be quite loud depending on where you are in the neighborhoods. So if you find that perfect location, there are a couple of things you can do to sort of dampen that noise. Like if you stand outside and you realize it is a little bit loud here, but I can't just get away from how good this house is. Some things that you can do is planting trees and shrubs and things like that that will block noise from around you in the neighborhood. That's one good way to do it. You can also get some noise dampening as far as like films and things like that for windows, and you can even get some soundproofing done in the walls and that sort of thing if it's that bad. So when you're thinking about buying a home, factor in a lot of these things. Factor in how loud it is, factor in, you know, is it close to the airport, and decide for yourself, is this worth it to you? Considering the impact that noise pollution can have on your health and just kind of your sanity, actually. So that's kind of it. I was really excited to do this video because it's something we don't think about very often. And it turns out it can have a huge impact on how we live and where we live. So think about that the next time you're out there taking a look at homes. What I'll do is I'll link some of the sources that I had that I was researching because I thought they were fascinating and I think you'll really like them. So I'll put those in the description below. And as always, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.